Hello, I'm Dr. Esther Lee. Welcome back to Dr. Lilly Chen's series on Old and New Silk Roads. Today, Dr. Chen will share her last episode with us. If you have missed her previous episodes, you can easily retrieve them by clicking our channel, Shared Thoughts. Dr. Chen, thank you for coming back to this series.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. I'm excited to share more about the old Silk Road and the new Silk Road.
Excellent. First, can we have a quick review of China's old Silk Roads?
Absolutely. If you can go to the next slide, and we can begin to acquaint ourselves with the notion of the Silk Road. Now, as you probably know, the Silk Road is based on the idea that silk is very precious. And so if you go onto the lower left corner, you will see the silkworms. And so the silkworms are the ones that produce the actual silk when they wrap themselves in the silk cocoon. And then we will be able to use and extract from the cocoon this very resilient silk that eventually becomes the beautiful silk fabric that we're using today. So the earliest known examples of woven silk dated back to 2700 BCE. And then it became very popular in the province of Zhejiang. So Zhejiang as a province is a silk province. And Hangzhou and the areas near Hangzhou, almost everyone grows silkworms in their homes. So they are the capital of silk. So the silk was prohibited from being shared outside of China. It was considered a secret. But later on, traveling by sea and by land, and mostly through what we call the Silk Road, the silk went to Persia and then to Europe. When the Europeans saw this silk, it was so exotic, they just loved it. And so this is what we see on the lower side, right side. You can see pictures of people. They love to wear silk. Next page, please. When you see this map, you see on the right side, this route that is in the red color. It is actually from Xi'an, from the old capital of China, Chang'an, all the way, actually passing through what we call the Tianshan area, and it goes all the way to Asia Minor, and then eventually to Persia. So there are, on the land road, Silk Road, there are at least 3 different routes. The Silk Road was a network of many routes connecting China to the Far East, to the Middle East, and to Europe. And mostly the Silk Roads were established in the Han Dynasty. And what I wanted to also stress is the route is back and forth. People from Persia, people from Asia would travel on camel's back to China, and people from China would carry the goods to Asia, Asia Minor, and then Persia, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, there were many, many small roads and large roads, all connected through a network of roads. If you want to go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, I understand how, we wonder how did Marco Polo's trip to China in the 13th century related to trading silks during the Yuan dynasty. Yeah, I know you're going to explain that to us.
Yes. So if you want to go to this one, on the upper right corner, you see a portrait of young Marco, not so young anymore in this. But Marco Polo did not go to China from Venice by himself, even though he is arguably the most famous Western travelers traveling to China on the old Silk Road. He actually went to China with his father and his uncle. So his father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Matteo, actually were the first from his family to travel to China. But Marco became famous because while he was a prisoner, he was lucky enough to share his cell with a beautiful writer from Pisa. And this writer wrote about Marco Polo's travels to China. And as a result, it was translated into multiple languages, and the Europeans became fascinated by this area or country called Cathay, which is China. And in fact, the book influenced the travel of Christopher Columbus. All right, so Cathay, this was what Marco Polo used to describe his trip to China. And the word is being used as Guotai or Cathay. By the way, Cathay Airlines, which is based in Hong Kong, has a beautiful lounge called Marco Polo Lounge to celebrate the beautiful stories of Marco Polo. Yes.
I didn't know that.
So when the next time you travel, be sure to travel and go to the Marco Polo Lounge. And in the lounge, you will see the Marco Polo's Silk Road. Okay. So it was a very beautiful trip for Marco Polo, which took many, many years. And this is on the right side of picture. So let's talk about Marco Polo, because as you know, we talk about Christopher Columbus. We talk about Zheng He going to the different parts of Asia and then eventually to Africa. Marco Polo's trip, together with his father and his uncle, the travels were much more arduous. You know, he was born in 1254, and most people say that he was born in the beautiful city of Venice. And indeed, Marco died in Venice and probably was born in Venice. His mother died after his birth, and he was actually brought up by his uncle and his aunt. His father, however, and his uncle traveled to China and returned to meet up with the young Marco. So when they traveled together, it took them 3 years from Venice all the way to the capital of the Yuan dynasty, which, of course, for most people, you know, is the Mongolian dynasty. And Marco and his father and uncle met up with Kublai Khan, Hu Bile, in the actual capital of the Yuan dynasty. So the Kublai Khan took a liking of Marco right away. Marco was a fantastic person. As a child, he learned the Venetian language, the Italian language, and also the French language. But on the way to Asia, he learned Turkish, he learned Persian, he learned Uyghur, the Uyghur language, and eventually he learned Mongolian. So Kublai Khan took a look at this young person, multilingual, multicultural, and took a liking of him and immediately put him as almost like an emissary or ambassador. So Marco, during the Yuan dynasty, traveled to India, to Burma, and to many other parts of Asia. So Marco really was so learned and so powerful as a person who traveled across the Silk Road and also in Asia. So
yeah, I can imagine how dangerous and will be, especially for 3 years without water. I mean, regular supply of water and food and everything. It must be very courageous, but sometimes we just forgot how dangerous, how challenging are those, trips made by earlier, you can say traders like Marco Polo. I'm sorry
yes,
to interrupt.
yes. Oh, no, it's wonderful. And I do encourage you to read the English translation or the Chinese translation of Marco Polo's travels. Then you'll know that he meticulously described the different terrains, the different peoples, the way
Right.
they live, the way they travel, and everything else. So it is a fascinating account of
Mhm,
what he saw with his own eyes and how
mhm,
he felt
mhm,
about these places
mhm,
along the way. So
mhm.
on the lower corner, lower right corner, you can see a beautiful pagoda. This was what Marco saw in China. He
Mhm,
not only saw this beautiful pagoda, he also saw many other things. So if
mhm.
we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So when he went back to Venice, there was a huge fight between the Venetians and the people from Genoa. And he was then imprisoned during that time. And while he was in prison, he became a good person to talk to his jailmate about his trip. Eventually, he was freed. And after he was freed, he got married. And then later, he had children. He finally died in 1324. His grave is in Venice. Next page. So while he was in China, he marveled at many, many things. For example, the gunpowder, for one, paper, for another. And then when he got to Marco Polo Bridge, which is also called the Lugouqiao, he
Mhm.
was looking at this beautiful bridge and he said, my goodness, the Chinese knew how to build
Yeah.
bridges.
Mhm.
And this particular bridge is famous, also infamous, because this is the bridge where the Japanese traveled over and invaded China. It's the beginning of the Sino-Japanese War.
Yes.
Next page. Yeah. So Marco, my goodness, when he went to China, he saw these beautiful china, also called as porcelain. So he called it porcelain, meaning porcelain. And he wanted so much to figure out how the Chinese made this porcelain. Of course, he was not able to really find out all the secrets of the
Mhm.
making of the porcelain. It was much later that the another Jesuit priest got to Jingdezhen to find
Mhm.
out how the porcelain was made.
Mhm.
Look at this piece of porcelain, so beautiful,
Mhm.
almost translucent and
Mhm.
pure and white, with beautiful flowers and designs. And he said, my goodness, he was definitely one of the ones that introduced China porcelain to Europe, to Venice for sure.
Mhm.
Next page.
And then later, the imperial Ming Dynasty's imperial envoy Zheng He's ocean silk roads also carry a variety of cargoes, including so-called new goodies discovered in many shipwrecks. So what are they? Maybe you can explain that to us in
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah, beautiful. So even though we usually associate the Ocean Silk Road with the 7 voyages of Zheng He, Admiral Zheng He, it was actually Marco Polo his father, his uncle, who accompanied the princess of the Mongolian dynasty Kublai Khan, Princess Kokochin, to Persia through the ocean road. So it was not Zheng He who started the Ocean Silk Road. He actually followed people like Marco Polo and others. So let's just say, take a look at Zheng He for a moment. Now, this beautiful map not only gives you an idea of where Zheng He started, how he and his ships traveled, and then where eventually the ship ended. So you can see quite clearly South China Sea, and then through the South China Sea all the way to Indonesia, from Sumatra and Java all the way through the Malacca Strait. Yes, slowly into the Indian Ocean, and then through the Indian Ocean to the Arabian Sea, from the Arabian Sea to the Persian Gulf. As you can see, Hormuz would be considered a very important area. And then from there, they traveled down through the Arabian Sea all the way to the Horn of Africa. As you can see very slowly, that is the Horn of Africa. From the Horn of Africa downward to Mogadishu, and then to the current day of Kenya, where you can see Mombasa and so on. So 7 trips. Each trip might take up to 2 years to travel with hundreds of ships and thousands of people. And so it's very important that we mark this part of the history, and to also talk about the Ming Dynasty with the beautiful cargoes. So can we take a look at the cargoes? Yeah.
Yeah, here's the finding.
Yeah. So the divers had to go down. And of course, they wanted to locate the sites of the shipwreck. I always talk about the shipwrecks as time capsules, because the moment the ship was wrecked and sank into the bottom of the sea, they remained silent and quiet and stable for as long as they are there. Okay, so as you can see, this group of divers did go down to what we call the Nanking cargo. And underneath the water, you can now see the china, the porcelain. You can see how they were stacked up very nicely. In the cargo arrangement, the china would be the ones that go down to the bottom of the cargo, wrapped around many times with lots of ropes and lots of covering, and then wrapped around in silk. Silk is very sturdy, very resilient. Of course, silk would disintegrate in the ocean after many hundreds of years. So the china would be the lowest bottom cargo, and the silk would be wrapped on top of china to protect the china. And then after the silk, they would use a lot of tea. Again, tea would be considered a buffer, but also a very important merchandise during the Silk Road. So the goodies that you're talked about, the ones that we can see from the shipwreck, but we know that they were silk products, and then many kinds of tea.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So the next page, you can see the ancient Silk Road versus the current new Silk Road. The ancient Silk Road, you can see from the left side, all the different various ways. As I said, it was clearly a network. And then you can see also the lower part of the ancient Silk Road, the Ocean Silk Road. Again, the Ocean Silk Road, mostly they travel by close to the land because they need supplies. As you said, water. They needed water, fresh water. They also needed supplies such as vegetables, such as fruits, and also other items so that they can survive. Because if you think a 2-year journey is almost 700 or 800 days, every day the crew would need to eat. Every day they would need to drink. So you think about the Silk Road, you know how they were very good at the supply chains. They also would need to know all the logistics. Also, in those days, the ancient Silk Road, they need to study the trade winds because the wind would carry them from one part of the world to another through the different directions of the winds. If you look at the right side, this is the current Silk Road. They are built through different networks of harbors, of railroads, of regular land roads. But you also can see they would go through many different terrains. But they're not only harbors. They are usually also different key cities where transportations is important through the railroad. For example, in Africa, we're talking about Mombasa as a port, but in Kenya, from Mombasa, you can go all the way into the inland of Kenya, for example. All right. So the next page.
Okay,
Yes?
we understand that, China has long history, and the popularity of China or porcelain began many years ago, even before Marco Polo's visit. Could you just give us some brief introduction about the history and geography of China before you continue the evolution of the clay pots and the ceramics prior to the era of porcelain?
Yes, I am very happy to do that. Next page, let's take a look. Okay, so give you a sense of Chinese history. The word China as a country, as a nation, is the same as the word China, not capital but small, is the actual beautiful porcelain. So why is it that the word China as a country synonymous to the word China as the fine china that we all use when we celebrate our birthdays or our anniversaries, wedding, and also beautiful holidays? We put out our beautiful fine china. It is exactly that same word. So China is China. Yeah. And China as a country dated back many, many years ago, the land of China, also called the Middle Kingdom. But we really don't know enough about it until the invention of the Chinese language. Once the Chinese language was developed, the history was made in written language. So we can say Xia dynasty, Shang dynasty, and Zhou dynasty. We call them Xia, Shang, Zhou. Those were the early records of the Chinese. And also the invention of the bronze, at least we can trace back to the Shang dynasty with lots of bronze. But also before that, people already knew how to make clay pots, and they were considered the beginning of the ceramics. Now, as far as clay pots are concerned, or containers, you can find different groups of people across the whole entire globe that the people were using, making clay pots. The native indigenous the Native Americans, the people in Egypt, other parts of the South America, other parts of Asia, Persia, the Arabian Peninsula, all those places, people already were making pots, clay pots, using clay. But what makes China so important as porcelain is because of the materials the Chinese were able to find, the materials were so fine that we define fine China and equate fine China with the porcelain from Jingdezhen and a few other places. May we see the next slide, please?
Yeah, could I just remind the viewers, those numbers, Xia and the Shang Dynasty, those are BC, okay, not AD. It's a long time ago.
Yes.
Okay, here.
BCE, yeah. So now we're looking at the large-scale trading between China and what we call the West. China and the West. West is called Xiyu. So Eastern Han Dynasty, Western Han Dynasty, lots of people travel on camel's back mostly to what we call the West, essentially going through the Silk Road to Persia and so on. And if you go on this side, right side of the Chinese history, you then would see what we call the Northern Dynasty and the Southern Dynasty, Nanbei Cao, leading to Sui Dynasty and also to the Tang Dynasty. Now, China, during the Sui Dynasty, they built the Grand Canal. This Grand Canal is Da Yunhe. This was also very important for the Chinese to transport people and goods from the north to the south, called Da Yunhe in China. Next, please. So, but what I wanted to talk about more is the brilliant period of the Tang Dynasty. Why so? Because during the Tang Dynasty, more travelers went west and more travelers came east, again on the Silk Road through the different web of the Silk Roads, and also the beautiful Tang Dynasty porcelain traveled west, mostly to India and to Persia. After the Tang Dynasty, we came to the Song Dynasty. And during this dynasty, also more porcelain was made. Many porcelain pieces traveled mostly on horsebacks and camelbacks to the west. Then we came to the Mongolian dynasty, so-called the Yuan dynasty. During the Yuan dynasty, the Marco Polo stories became so popular. It is the Yuan dynasty, the Mongolian dynasty, that the Marco family went to China, and young Marco became a Chinese official.
Good. Or expert.
Yes. So next page. So after the Yuan dynasty, we came to the Ming dynasty, Song dynasty and Ming dynasty. This dynasty is marked with the huge envoys of Cheng He 7 different times. After Cheng He, the Ming court decided to shut down all the travels through the ocean. Essentially, they also burned and destroyed records of the Yuan Ming dynasty. So there is not much to be found in China about Cheng He's travel. When you want to know about Cheng He's travel, you would have to follow his ships throughout his ocean voyages, whereby today there are evidences of his visits through excavation and through some of the buildings that he started, and most importantly, through the people that he left behind on each of the spots. Many descendants of the men that Cheng He left behind are what we call the Chinese diaspora of today.
Isn't that shame? When a government or rulers changed, the whole world changed, because the trading stopped. The merchandise no longer available through the voyage, his voyage at least. Well, that's another story. But anyway,
Yeah.
okay,
So
thank you.
if you think about the after the Ming Dynasty stopped these ocean travels,
Right.
and the Qing Dynasty, they are the Manchurians. They also stopped because they thought they were the greatest people. But because they stopped, many people from Europe wanted to work with trade, with China in trade, eventually causing the opening of the several ports in China. But most infamous one would be the Opium War. Okay,
I think Qing Dynasty decided to close it because they thought they were the greatest, nation. They want to be isolated. They don't mind to be isolated, from the West. And turn out they lost all the technology or development outside the world. So that's a loss for the dynasty.
True. And also the fact that they really wanted to be very much encapsulated in the Forbidden City.
Right.
It gives you a sense that people were forbidden to go into the city.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, forbidden.
Yeah.
So you can imagine they didn't want many people. However, the last emperor, Puyi, he did hire a tutor from Great Britain to teach him things about the Western world. He was actually fascinated by, the telescope and the cameras and bicycles and so on. So of course, I think the movie, The Last Emperor, which was used by an Italian director, I think most of the records that they use were accurate, but not, of course, everything. Yeah.
Maybe we should revisit that movie again.
Yeah, we should.
That gives me the incentive to revisit.
Yeah. So let's go back to history and talk about China. I do need to kind of get this on the map again. So if you look at the right side of the map, you see the country of China. And if you look at the middle part, it is a piece of China with a very auspicious symbol of dragon. And Chinese people, because I believe that we are all seeds of the dragon. Okay, very auspicious, very auspicious. Yeah, and then if you look at the left side, you will see a little township or village called Changnan. So if you listen carefully, Changnan. So all three are China, okay? But each one has a different meaning, okay? So if you want to go from the left to the right, I'll say Changnan produces China. China is situated in China, okay? The word China in Chinese is the Middle Kingdom, okay? May I see the next slide, please? So let's go back to that dot, the little dot of Changnan, which is housed in the southern part of a Chang River. And the Chang River is a tributary of the Changjiang Chang River. And Chang River is also known as the Yangtze River. And the Yangtze River is best known as the river of China, modern China, and also with the three gorges. So if you ever travel on this river, you can go all the way from Chongqing down to Shanghai. Can we go to the next page to see the enlarged portion of the famous Changnan? You can see a river going through called Changjiang Chang River. And you can see the red piece, Changnan, which is known as Jingdezhen, and also known, most famous for the beautiful porcelain that we know today. Next page, please. So the history of Changnan went back a long, long time ago, and they discovered the clay called Gaoling clay. This particular clay is very, very beautiful. 高岭土. This clay is white, is pure, is translucent. When you mix this clay with other materials and fire it up in very high temperature, you get the beautiful white porcelain. So we can go back to the slides. Yeah, so this is where you need to go if you are interested in the history of the beautiful China, the fine China. That is where you would need to go in the province of Jiangxi, in the city of Jingdezhen, also known as Changnan. Next, please. So if you look at this clay pot, it's a piece of pottery that confirms the Chinese people already used pottery from 20,000 years ago. Now, this pottery, of course, was not fired with high temperature, and it is not the fine china we know today, but it was found in Jiangxi province. It's called Xianrendong Yizhi, okay? Very important piece of evidence of pottery. Next, we have next one, which you already know. So all of us who are interested in China, fine China, must learn the word Gaoling. So you can see, for the Chinese language, we use Tao Ci as one word or one term. Tao, on the one hand, on the left side, really refers to pottery. Mostly the ceramic is coarse and fired in low temperature. On the right side, we use the word Ci. Ci is translated as porcelain, which equals to fine china, and it's translucent using the Gaoling clay, and it's white, and it's absolutely beautiful. If you own a piece of porcelain, you should be very, very proud. Next, please. So terminology is important. Although we use the word ceramic, although we also use the word China, we, in the Chinese language, we divide the ceramics into two, Tao and Ci. Tao is the coarse, low-fired ceramic, and Ci is high-fired, beautiful, mostly translucent, and very, very beautiful and thin. So if you look at this page, you will see on the left side, pottery fired at low temperatures. Middle page is a middle side is mostly 原始词, the beginning of China. And on the right side, the Chinese China porcelain, which would be fired at higher temperature of 1200 and up. Next page. In most of the beautiful museums in the world, you will find these types of porcelain being shown. So these are called Chinese ceramics. And you can see it is 1600 to 476 BCE, before Common Era. And you can see these beautiful porcelains, not only in China, but in Taiwan and many other parts of the world. Next page, please. So we want to talk about 剑瓷, 剑窑的剑瓷. This is a very special type of porcelain, which fired in high temperature, adding the element of iron, makes this a very rich color. This beautiful color is admired and very deeply appreciated with this clay. And you often see it in Japanese pottery, and they use this for the tea bowls or teacups for the Japanese tea ceremony. So if you know anything about Japanese tea ceremony, you will find this type of porcelain as well. Next page. So let's go to the word 瓷. We also use the word 瓷器 together. So we're looking at porcelaina or porcelain or 瓷器. All three mean the same thing. in the Eastern Han Dynasty, you can already see intricate designs and also beautiful colors of these beautiful qingzi. We call it qingzi. Qing is like blue, but it's lighter than blue. And in the Chinese language, qing chu yu lan, sheng yu lan. Lan is blue. Qing is also blue, a different kind of blue. The Chinese people love qingzi. In fact, the people in the world appreciate qingzi very much. In almost all the beautiful museums, you'll find them. Next, please. So the first peak of porcelain, as I said earlier, came in the Tang Dynasty. Tang Dynasty, so much trade went on between China and the West. You can see the beautiful, on the left side, the beautiful blue porcelain. In the middle, the white porcelain. And the most famous on the right, Tang San Cai, the three-color porcelain, usually brownish, greenish, and whitish. Beautiful. Next, please. The typical porcelain of San Cai can be found in many parts of Asia, in Persia, in India, and in Arabia. These are the three colors. And they adopted these colors and made them into many plates, bowls, horses, and beautiful camels. And as you can see in the Middle East, all these designs can be found. And many of them were made in China using the typical colors of the Tang San Cai. Again, San means three, and Cai means colors. So all these beautiful colors, you can spot them right away. And wherever you go, in the beautiful museums in Italy, in France, in Great Britain, in Germany, and everywhere else, you will find these beautiful colors and designs. Next, please. So when you have the white color, the brown color, the blackish colors, by the 6th century, China produced the most diverse and technically advanced ceramics in the world. There's no doubt about it. So many kilns were established in China, and the qualities are so good that the Western countries became fascinated by China, and they began to try to figure out how it was made and how could they produce them in the West. Eventually, they found some ways, and they made the bone china, usually grinding the cow bones, and then they make these bones into powders, and these powders were mixed with the clay, and eventually we have beautiful bone china. The British royal family used china and also a bone china. So you can see the next slide, please. So the white, brown, black Chinese ceramics, they were developed with a high fire. When you fire these items high with glaze, you will find these beautiful porcelains. Also, changes in dining and drinking, they became very sociable. They drank tea, people drank tea, and the tea, of course, became very popular, not only in China, also in Europe. And in the Buddhist meditation, a lot of tea was used and a lot of tea was drunk. At the time, tea was made from ground powder derived from a cake or a brick. We call them cha zhuan because in order to travel, the teas had to be actually dried and then squeezed and made into a tea cake or a tea brick. And then later we break the cake and break the tea and then soften them and use them to drink. Not only tea was important, but also salt, spices, herbs, and fruits were mixed in the tea. So the tea was considered very important. So tea and China and silk, they were all such important merchandises. And also the expansion of also the Ocean Silk Road made tea a very important part of the cargo. Again, tea would be considered so important to travel to Southeast Asia, to West Asia, to Africa, and of course to Europe. All these, tea and the ceramic and China, they were all integrated into one type of history, which is the history of trade. Next, please.
Do you think when you talk about tea, silk, and porcelains combined together, do you think because the packing, the cargo, like you said earlier, out of convenience, they thought that's a good idea to have all those three, go out to export?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking wild. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's called entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
People
right.
early on understood this trading should be of great goods, or you say goodies.
Yeah.
And then look at the goodies. How do you protect these beautiful? Look at this picture.
Right.
How do you protect these beautiful, beautiful porcelain?
Yeah.
Let's put them in silk, which is resilient. And then, yes, everybody loves tea. If you think about teacups and so on, the tea bowls, you think about tea. So exactly, if you think about this, it's all entrepreneurship, totally into innovation of the olden days and creativity of the people in the olden days, in the history. So if you look at the Song dynasty, so we said Tang and then Song. So after the beautiful Tang Sancai, brilliant Chinese porcelain, they were being made in China. They were also being shipped outside of China, but they came out of different kilns. And so they have, each kiln would have very different specificity. If we look at the upper left corner, we found the Ru Yao. In the middle, we found Ge Yao. And the Ge is a brother, so the two brothers work together. And then we found next one, the crackle or the cracked, Guan Yao. Now, those were sent to the palaces for the empress and so on. These cracks were not really cracks. They are just patterns, beautiful, naturally crackling patterns. And then you see Ding Yao on the right side. You go down the left lower corner, you see Jian Yao. And then you go to the middle white one, as we said earlier, Jing De Zhen Yao. And then you go to the right side, the purple color is Jun Yao. And then the last one on the right side, lower corner, is Yao Zhou Yao. So not only can we identify these beautiful pieces, most experts know them. Just take a look at them, they know right away where these porcelain pieces came from. Next, please. Yeah. So in the Yuan dynasty, Yuan and then Ming, okay? So we talk about Tang and Song. Now in the Yuan dynasty, you find this color. This is an underglaze red color. So different minerals were used during this dynasty. As you can see, the Mongolians, the Mongols, they were the people that travel on horses and camels, and they were also much more coarse in their thinking, in their ways of doing things. So you can see these patterns are more wild, more open, and not so delicate. So these are typical of the Yuan dynasty. And Yuan dynasty was when Marco went to China.
Next. Yeah, no wonder he was fascinated by that.
Yeah, totally, yes. Next. Okay, so you can see these ceramics, beautiful ones from the Yuan dynasty and also from Jing De Zhen. You can see the different types. Some are very intricate especially on the one on the right side. You can see the beautiful, intricate designs of flowers and patterns. Mostly these motifs, those designs, show symbols of longevity, symbols of prosperity, and so on and so forth. Next page, please. Okay, so if you take this one, in the Yuan dynasty, you can see the blue and the white. So we have the Yuan blue and also the Ming blue. So Marco, of course, was fascinated by the Yuan blue. And you can see beautiful stories on this beautiful vase. Next, please.
Yeah, and you mentioned all those great kilns. And I understand there are 5 most famous ones during the Song Dynasty around the 10th and the 13th century. And
Yes.
So could you, just explain a little bit, because we know, the European people were so fascinated, treasure the porcelains. How those kilns related to the origin and the refinement of porcelains?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see some of the kilns again. So I mentioned before some of them, and
Yes.
so by this time you should probably already know what to look for. Okay, so
Right.
let's look at the five kilns. So let's go to the center because it's purple. That's Junyao. All the purple ones came out of Junyao. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then if we can go to the right side, Dingyao, that's white, very, very pure white color. Okay, and then let's travel to the very left, Guanyao. Okay, Guanyao is for the official, for the government, for the officials, and also for the emperors. Then we look at Ruyao. Ruyao is kind of a celadon color, and that's also typical of the Ru area. And then Geyao is the second one from the right, the color, and then also you can see some cracks. So you can see Ru, Jun, Guan, Ding, Ge during the Song dynasties. They produce very specific pieces of China.
Yeah, it make me think about the Chinese characters. Are they related to the users, the rank, or the background, or socioeconomic level? Of course, Guan, you say it's official use. Maybe this is for the common people, and this is for the family members, brothers.
So the one that is for the court and for the officials, no common people could have them.
How about
but
this?
Some of the others, of course, they could have them. But the coarse ones, okay, the commoners would use them. But for the literati, the people who are considered learned people, they would always try to acquire some of them for their study, because in their study, they must display some of these beautiful porcelains. And also they use them for their writing. When you have an ink, you have a bowl, brushes. A porcelain bowl to wash your brushes.
Yeah,
okay,
brushes, right, like this.
And then when they drink their tea or they drink their wine, they would use them too. Yeah, so it is all a very fine China. So when you talk about the beautiful porcelain, the literati, they love them very, very much. But the artisans who make them, sometimes they didn't get to keep them. They don't get to keep. Yeah.
Okay.
Next page. All right. So this is a map. It's a very interesting map. The red arrow shows the Jingdezhen kiln. So today, if you go to visit Jingdezhen, later I'm going to talk about it, you will find many kilns over there. But as you can see, this is a Chinese map. Every single little square shows a little kiln there. So they are not only in the Fujian province, in the Jiangxi province, but also in Hebei province, in Jiangsu province, etc., etc. Okay, next one. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time about Jingdezhen, because it's many people ask me the question, why is Jingdezhen so famous? I can only tell you that it is because of the Gaolingtu. They also call it the Bai Dunzi. is the white color, 白墩子. This is 高岭土, the famous white color. But if you look at the right side, it's a beautiful Chinese painting showing the beauty of this area. It is always shrouded in clouds. And the kilns, when they fire up, it makes the whole city almost misty and mysterious. And you can see many mountains, river, and lake. It's all about a mysterious town called Changnan, south of the Chang River, hence the word Changnan. And during the Chongzhen period, the name Jingde was given because the emperor loved so much the porcelain from this area. And the porcelain is also called 白墩子. So these terms are very important. So we learn 景德, 白墩子, and 高陵. For anybody who studies China and porcelain, those three terms are absolutely essential. Next page, please. So Jingdezhen, located in the Jiangxi province of China. It derives from the current name from the Zhenzong period, Jingde, corresponding to the period and Zhenzong's rule between 1004 and 1007 CE. Jingdezhen, which houses both large kilns and smaller ones. So the whole entire town is spread around with different kilns. And it has been in production all the time through the ancient times to the modern days. Next, please. So look at this beautiful city. I have been there. It is absolutely fascinating. You have the old homes, you have the new homes, you have the old kilns, you have the old kilns all together. As you know, this city was spared by the Japanese bombing. Very important for you to know about it because it was shrouded in clouds, but also because of the smoke they came out of the different kilns. The firing of the kilns, they were producing the potteries and the ceramics. The Japanese Air Force could not locate the city. And in other words, the kilns were spared because of the city. It's very interesting. So the city remained very untouched. The next picture, please. Yeah, so today, if you go to visit, you will find these beautiful, beautiful pieces of porcelain, including such beautiful pieces as the dragon that welcomes all of you. Next, please.
It's still going on?
Going on, totally going on. Yeah, today, if you go, you'll find. So from Changnan, as you know, to Jingdezhen, you can still see the little roads that will lead you, called the 池石古道, the ancient road leading you to the porcelain. Okay, it remains a beautiful piece for everybody to look at. Next page. So just remind you one more time, Jingde, the town, came from the village of Changnan. Changnan leads to the word China. China, the porcelain, leads to the people calling the Chinese, the nation, China. In fact, China still uses the two-word Middle Kingdom as today's designation of the nation China. Next, please. So if you look at today, each bowl is done by an artist, and it's all hand painted. In the past, only the men were allowed to learn from his father or grandfather the trade and the secret of making china. No women in the past were allowed. But the next page, you can see now women are able to also make these porcelain. Women artists are part of the history making of today. Next, please. So we talk about the porcelain. We also wanted to say that because the ceramics became so popular, China became so popular that it took on a tremendous position in religion, in Buddhism, and in Islam. They use a lot of ceramics, and a lot of motifs were also used on those porcelains. Next, please. So we talk about the 5 kilns. Now I think you can identify this blue, this bluish color is called Ruyao. Next, please. The purple one, you know, Junyao. Next, please. You can see Guanyao, cracks. Next, please. Dingyao, the white ones. Even you now, with a small, short tutorial, you can identify them. The next one, Geyao, okay, beautiful. Ge means brothers, so the 2 brothers work together. So now we need to also explain 2 concepts, very important concepts. Next one, please. Ya and Su. Ya on the left, Su on the right. Su is a word that shows people, okay? People. What kind of people? Common people. Popularity, ordinary, okay? Those would be more what we call ceramics and lower quality China. Ya, on the other hand, is the higher quality China. Ya means prestigious, graceful, elegant, and traditional. So the literaries would use the word ya, while the common people would use the su. Both ya, su, gong shang, that means the Chinese people, whether they were considered the commoners or the royals, they love China. Okay.
So no class discrimination.
No, everybody loves China. Yes. Next, please. So in the Song Dynasty, you can see this beautiful Ya, as you can see. Okay. The next one, please. This would be an example of what Ya means. You wanted only the beautiful porcelain to be presented to the emperor. So in this place in Fujian, this is an example of a jianyao. Fujian, the same word jian. And you can see in this picture how the kiln was established alongside the hill. And they produced this beautiful jianyao. You can see it in the middle. Now, hundreds and thousands, probably millions of pieces were destroyed. Now, each piece, even a broken piece, would be considered a treasure today. But why were they destroyed? Because the artisans thought they were not perfect. Today, even imperfection would be considered beautiful. So today, the destruction of these pieces is no longer a practice, but in the past, people would destroy anything imperfect. Any what we call 瑕疵 would be considered imperfect, and they would be destroyed, thrown away. So the evidence shows so many of them.
So next they have to be flawless.
Flawless, yeah. Any flaw would not be considered good. Another place in Fujian is called Dehua. Dehua, just for you, as a very important white China. White China is considered beautiful China. And it's called Blanc de Chine, beautiful, okay? Next one. So look at the picture of the Yuan dynasty. This is the person who befriended Marco Polo. We wanted to take a look at him because he was the one that really traveled far, and he considered the beautiful blue and white porcelain as being also the symbol of Mongolian dynasty, Yuan, Qing, Hua. Let's see the next page. So you can see an old sample of Fuliang Ciju, which would be the area of Hu Tianyao, okay? This is during the Yuan dynasty. But more importantly, the next page.
Before you go next one, does this mean, the bottom means the trademark or like some, trademark or the date or some information hidden
Yes.
there?
Yeah, you would not find the names of any artisans on those pieces at the bottom, but it will show sometimes the dynasty. It will
Right.
show, something suspicious or whatever. In this case, it will be a very important sample. Yeah. Next, yeah. So Marco, okay, during his era, he saw this beautiful Yuan Qing Hua, beautiful piece. And this piece is in the British Museum. So when you go to visit, you'll find it. Beautiful blue and white. Next, please. Now, after the Yuan dynasty came the Ming dynasty. You can see the two samples. One is deep blue, blue and white in Jindezhen. Now this time, not only is it blue, they marvel at the skills of the artist. As you asked earlier, the Europeans could not figure out how they were made, but especially the Dutch, they just became totally crazy. They were crazy about these beautiful pieces. Each household, no matter how poor, how rich, they wanted to have some china, eventually leading to the actual production of the Delft porcelain. They say no china, no Delft. And so you can see how beautiful they are. So they use them for display and large plates. In fact, if you go to many of the beautiful museums to look at the oil paintings, the special paintings that many museums collect, you will find on those pieces of painting beautiful china as fruit plates or as decorations. So this is the fascination of China in Europe. In the 16th century, you can find multicolors. They become red, blue, yellow, green, and the foreign demand became so popular, including Japan and including Europe. And so countries such as Japan, such as England, such as the Germany or the Netherlands, they all began to produce porcelain. Yeah. Next page.
And then you mentioned the British Museum about the second floor. You say it's the collection of all the Chinese porcelains?
Yeah, it's a special room. I believe it's
special room.
75. And it is, I think, on the second floor. I was there just recently. Yeah, but beautiful. It would be a very fascinating discussion just about the British Museum, especially the collection of the China. Yes. Next, please. Yeah. So in the Ming Dynasty, so you were talking about the bottom, okay? No name of the artisans could be found. But if you look at the lower part, you will see 大明宣德年制. This is the great Ming Dynasty. In the time of the Xuande Emperor, the time of Xuande 年制, that means a specific year where this was made. So during the Ming Dynasty, Ming, Qing, Hua, also beautiful. So Yuan, Ming, Qing, all three dynasties, Yuan dynasty, the Mongol dynasty, the Mongolian dynasty, Ming, the Zhou dynasty, Zhou Yuanzhang, and then Qing, the Manchurian dynasty. All three dynasties continue to develop and to improve the quality of Chinese porcelain china. That's why today, when you think about porcelain, you think about China. And all three dynasties tap at it kept improving, kept figuring out the different ways to make the underglaze, the top glaze, the clay, the beautiful minerals that could be used into the firing of these beautiful fine china.
Do you
Next.
always be able to find the date? I mean, the error in the bottom of the vessel or containers? Do you
Not always. Not always. A piece like this, marked clearly with the 大明宣德, each piece now in the auction houses, they are millions of dollars for one piece. Okay. That's why the cargo underneath the sea, if they could be excavated, each cargo would be thousands of millions of dollars. Next page, please. Do you want to comment about this map?
Yes, I would like to, because the changing world has changed the popular trading, obviously, cargoes or merchandise. And today, silk clothes, like we said, or porcelain containers are no longer as popular as 100 years ago. And modern trading merchandise are very different, like high-tech items, and then also changing rapidly. And only through open trading, here I'm emphasizing open trading and exchanging of ideas, our civilization will continue developing toward a better life. And our future will be molded by our own policies and decisions in all areas, political, economic, all areas. And do you agree with that?
Yes, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
As you know, in the days of the camels, of the horses, of the sailboats, ships, it was difficult to carry cargoes.
Right.
So ships became an important one. But imagine today, we have highways, we have railroads, we have huge airplanes.
Right.
Then we have ocean liners and cargo ships, and then tanks, and so on, with oil tankers. And so you think about that, you now know the new Silk Road is really not the same as the old. The old China Road is no longer the same. What we're looking at are harbors, airports, railroads, regular roads, and all kinds of things that help people transport not only goods, but people. Right. Most importantly, ideas and culture.
Right, ideas. And so we can say Silk Road is not about silk anymore. And China with a capital C is not about China with a lowercase c either. So, well, we really appreciate this beautiful time with Dr. Lilly Cheng, and thank her again for her informative presentation. Another reminder, Dr. Chen's previous 3 episodes are also available on YouTube by clicking our channel, Shared Thoughts. Don't miss her discovery and intriguing research. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.